Modern Warfare 2 is finally here. The game that we all have been waiting for a very, very long time is finally here. Playing Vanguard for that last 1 year was kind of hectic, but now we are over that hump and now we will be playing Modern Warfare 2 for the next 2 years. So with the start of this game, I bring to you guys the perfect settings guide. All of you might be wondering, what settings should I be using? Should I be using this? Should I be using that? Well, I'll make that job simple for you guys. All you need to do is leave a like on this video and watch this entire video all the way through. And by the end of it, I promise you, your settings would be absolutely perfect. But without further ado, let's get right into it. Starting off with the button layout, I personally play on the default button layout, which is something that I've been used to for a very, very long time. I like to keep my bumpers and triggers switched with each other, and the reason for that is that you can reduce the time that it takes to actually press in the button and engage in the gunfight by a lot. So if you haven't yet tried it out, I highly recommend it. It might take some time to get used to it, but once you do, it's going to pay off in the long run. With the stick layout, we play with default, vibration off. Now this is really important. Vibration not only kind of distracts you from your gameplay, but it can also have a negative impact on your stick drift. If you keep vibration on for long durations of time, the potentiometers inside the controller can get damaged due to the constant vibrations. Again, with trigger effect, you want to keep this to off because that will give you the fastest reaction times possible. Now, the horizontal and the vertical stick sensitivity, I like to keep mine at 1414. ADS sensitivity, we keep this at 1. We make sure to keep all of these at 1 as well. I play with automatic sprint off because there's a high chance that when you're engaging in a gunfight, your sprint to fire time is going to be significantly higher given that you're coming out of a tactical sprint. I personally play with weapon mount off, but for me, I don't like weapon mounting, so I would prefer to keep it off. For interact and reload behavior, I like to keep it on tap to reload, which allows me to quickly reload. But if I was playing Warzone, I would set this to prioritize interact, and that is primarily because that would allow opening up the loot caches a lot quicker. Now, going into advanced settings, we will obviously keep the target aim assist off. I use the default aim assist type, which gives me the best amount of rotational and target aim assist for regular weapons. But if you were to be using snipers or other single shot weapons like marksman rifles, I would recommend switching this over to precision. The reason for switching over to precision is primarily because those weapons do not get rotational aim assist, and you could benefit from the stronger target aim assist that you could get with precision. We will be covering about each of these aim assist types in like a future video, so keep an eye out for that. My aim response curve type is set to dynamic, which offers me better aim rate control, thus giving me better control over my aim. The ADS sensitivity transition timing, we definitely want this set to instant. And the reason for that is as soon as you press in your aim down sight button, you will instantly get the aim down sight sensitivity, which is a lot easier to control in my opinion. Now we set the custom sensitivity per zoom to off, which allows us to keep a steady sensitivity across all zoom levels. Now coming to the input dead zone, we will keep the left stick minimum dead zone to around 0. And the reason for that is that it will give you faster movement speed. As soon as you start moving your left stick is when your character starts moving. Keeping this value to an absolute 0 will help with your movement, thus helping you win more gunfights. Now the right stick minimum input dead zone, I have personally set it to 0.04, but you might want to mess around with this setting for yourself by going into a custom game, starting with the value of 0 and going up by increments of 1. And this is primarily because each controller has like their own default dead zone. The way that you actually do this is by going into a custom game, setting the default dead zone value to absolutely 0, moving your right stick a little bit until it starts to give you some amount of stick drift. Then you keep increasing the value of the dead zone until you stop getting stick drift. Now the left stick max input dead zone is set to around 90, so you can get to the maximum attainable sprint speed quicker. Now we will keep the right stick maximum to 1. Now coming to the L2 and R2 button dead zones, we will keep these values to an absolute 0. Although it is mentioned and labeled as L2 and R2 button dead zones, this correctly translates to your aim down sight and shoot button. So keeping this value to a 0 will give you the faster shoot time speed. Now we have set the tactical sprint behavior to double tap, and the reason for that is it allows us to have more control over our tactical sprints, so we can utilize either walking, running, or tac sprint whenever needed. Now we will set the grounded mantle to off, which allows us to have more control over our movement so we don't accidentally mantle objects while we are trying to jump and win more gunfights. Automatic ground mantle is another one of those settings which are needed to actually help you get cleaner movement. So keeping this setting to off will help you with your movement. Now for invert slide and dive behavior, we need to keep this to standard as it will allow us to get cleaner slides and we can slide from just the press of a single button. Now we will keep the depleted ammo weapon switch set to off. Now this will allow us to manually have the ability to switch to a different gun when we are running low on ammo or actually use our melee to win a gunfight. Now coming on to graphics settings, now we will keep the on-demand texture streaming set to off. And the reason for that is to minimize any and all latency. Now we definitely should turn off all the processing effects. World motion blur should be set to off, weapon motion blur should set to be off, film grain should be set to 0, depth of field effect should be set to off, and in a competitive setting game where milliseconds matter, it is important to be able to get in as much information as possible by keeping all those 4 settings off. Now keeping fidelity FX on will allow you to get clearer targets in the distance, will help the image render clearly, and you will be able to spot enemies from a distance without adding any sort of unnecessary latency or unnecessary drawbacks. Now I personally play on a 120Hz display, and if you have one too, I highly recommend turning this on. Now I personally play on a 100 field of view, but you can feel free to try out any other FOV setting that best suits your taste and your gameplay style. Now we will be covering the best field of view setting in a future video, so stay tuned for that. Now the ADS field of view is set to affected. Keeping this set to wide will make our weapon look smaller. Now with our weapon being smaller, we have lower visual recoil and we are able to capture more information that is being displayed on the screen. Now we will set both the first person and the third person camera movement to least, which helps us when we are turning around to spot enemies better. Now coming on to the brightness. Now contrary to popular belief, keeping a high brightness level is not the best option always, and I'll explain in a minute how. My personal brightness setting is set to 50, but you should alter this value based upon the type of display that you are on. Now I want you guys to completely ignore the image on the right and the image on the left. Now as soon as I notice that the middle image is completely not visible, I move it up by 1 notch, which makes it barely visible. Now for me, this value is set to 50 based upon my display, but you should definitely try out the brightness based upon the display that you are currently on. Now coming to the audio settings, we definitely want to set the audio mix to headphones, which allows us to get crystal clear footsteps. Now the master volume is set to 100, which might be a little loud for you initially, but over time you will get used to it and it will allow you to get footsteps loud and clear. And the music volume should definitely be set to off. The music is definitely a distraction and will distract you from getting good gunplays. Now we keep the dialogue, effects, hit marker volume set to 100. Now it is important to set the mono audio to off, which will help with directional sound. Now coming into interface, we are going to be keeping the first few options set to default because these don't play any amount of role on your gameplay. Now we are going to be changing the color customization. Now I like to keep the color filter set to filter number 2, which gives the game a vibrant look and feel to it. Now we set it as both, select the intensity as 100 and 100 for each of them. Now changing that color palette to Tritanopia and changing these individual settings. Now this step is definitely important, more on that in a minute. But up until then, I will be showing you guys these individual colors. Now the most important out of all of this is the enemy color, which is set to green. Now statistically, it has been proven that the green color gives you the fastest amount of reaction times. This will definitely take some time to get used to, but once you start to get used to the enemy color green, you will start to understand that you will be winning a lot more gunfights than usual. Now we keep the center dot set to on, which adds a static center dot to the center of the screen, which helps with the overall centering and helps in improving our aim. Now we set the center dot scale to default, and we keep the horizontal compass to on, crosshair set to on, hit marker visuals on, damage based hit marker on. Now for the player names, we definitely want this set to full name as it will allow us to spot the enemies in the distance and a lot clearer. Now we can keep the telemetries based upon what you like. I personally keep the server latency and the packet loss set to on, which helps me monitor my overall connection and find out if I am on a bad ping. Well, that is going to be it for this video, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all enjoyed this video. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. I post content every single day, whether it is class setups, gameplays, settings guides, and a whole lot of other stuff. And now that Modern Warfare 2 is here, you can expect a lot more content in the next coming days. But until then, it has been a pleasure. I'll see you in the next one.